Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kalen DeBoer, Alabama, working their way through fall camp. And Dill, this is one of those programs that I look at and I'm just fascinated every single day, updating the message boards, reading the fall camp practice notes. And I want to particularly dive in to the offensive line and the wide receiver position and kind of how those units are shaking out heading into 2024. Now, what I think is absolutely wild, you get a lot of national media analysts looking at this Alabama team. And I think just saying they're taking a step back from a talent standpoint, look, just because you haven't heard of some of these names yet at the college football landscape don't mean that this Alabama team is not chock full with talent across the board. You make no mistake about it. This Alabama program is about as talented as it gets heading into 2024. Want to dive into the offensive line, the wide receiver room, get a feel for how those units are shaking out. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Alabama fans. It truly has been a blast talking this program since Kalen DeBoer has taken over, whether we're talking recruiting, transfer portal, preview in 2024. The amount of support y'all continue to show truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And I think much more importantly, though we don't necessarily agree on some of these position battle shakeouts, would love to hear from the Alabama fans in the comments section. Let's start with this offensive line, because I think this is one of the more fascinating storylines within this Alabama program from a physicality standpoint. Kalen DeBoer has never worked with an offensive line this physically imposing. I think from a physically imposing standpoint, this is probably the top unit in the country. Now, you go back to 2023 with Washington, that was a very good offensive line. It won the Joe Moore Award. That being said, it was a kind of different type of offensive line. It was very good in pass protection. That was kind of its calling card. You look at this Alabama offensive line, it is going to move bodies off the line of scrimmage. And one of the things that stands out to me with Kalen DeBoer is, yeah, there are some principles that Kalen DeBoer has used to get to be the head coach of Alabama. He is a very good offensive mind. He has principles that he's had a lot of success with. But what makes Kalen DeBoer such an excellent head coach is how he knows how to use his personnel. He's going to scheme this offense around the talent and skill sets of this team. When you look at Jalen Milroe, the most dynamic quarterback with the football in his hands, you look at an offensive line that is going to move bodies off the line of scrimmage. A lot of people assume that this is going to be a pass-heavy offense for 2024. I look at it and say, hey, Kalen DeBoer is licking his chops in terms of the run game in 2024. I think they're going to lean on it. Now, kind of getting into this offensive line, Dill, I think we start at the tackle spot. Caden Proctor, Wilkin Formby, Elijah Pritchett, kind of battling it out for those starting tackle spots. How do you see the offensive tackle position shaking out for Alabama?
So I personally think there's almost no doubt in my mind that Caden Proctor's tackle. And obviously you've heard the rumblings out of camp working with the twos and not with the ones or whatever. At the end of the day, he's going to be the left tackle. I think he's athletically best fit to be that left tackle. He was playing really good towards the end of the year last year. Obviously has slimmed down and I think should take steps in terms of his pass pro. But I think he really does fit what they want to do in terms of moving guys off the ball, being able to run physically. And frankly, I think you look at the other two, in Elijah Pritchett and Wilkin Formby, I think both are more physically equipped to play that right tackle spot. I don't think either are the premier, smoothest of foot athletes, if you will, at that tackle spot, but both big physical offensive linemen who are going to do an excellent job getting guys off the line of scrimmage. I think that's one thing I look at, especially for Elijah Pritchett, is I think he took a lot of heat last year, and he didn't have a great year when he was working in that left tackle spot. But I really, obviously only a young player, redshirt freshman last year. And frankly, I don't think he's totally fit to be that left tackle role. I think he should excel at that right tackle spot. And if anything we hear out of camp is true, it sounds like he's playing good ball.
Elijah Pritchett is much better suited to play right tackle. And I think you're going to see a massive step in the right direction. I personally think he's going to be the starting right tackle for Alabama. And like you said, he's just better suited to play that right side. He's a big body that moves people off the line of scrimmage. Wilkin Formby, I mean, hey, at the end of the day for Alabama at the tackle spot, you got some really good options. And you look at a lot of other Power 4 programs, they are desperate for starting caliber tackles. I think Alabama's got multiple really good options. I see it as Caden Proctor at left, right tackles Elijah Pritchett. I think you're going to see, and Dill, you noted it, some really, really big-time steps from Elijah Pritchett going into year 3. I think he's going to be a really good right tackle for Alabama. Now, I think the more fascinating conversation with this Alabama offensive line is you look towards the inside of the offensive line. like, it doesn't get better than Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts. I mean, that is not only the most physically imposing guard combination you see in the country, I think it's the best guard combination that you see in the country. Now, the question that you have that I'm going to push back on is Parker Brailsford at the center spot. I can see your concerns with Parker Brailsford in the SEC at 6'2", 280 pounds. I don't think Kalen DeBoer brings Parker Brailsford over if he doesn't think he can hang at the SEC level. But I'll give you the tee box here so you can voice maybe some question marks about Parker Brailsford at the center spot, and then I'm going to refute it.
Well, I think the things that come to my mind is, they don't really have another center on this roster who I think they feel particularly comfortable about playing, with Tommy Brockmeyer obviously leaving in the spring. And the other part is, I just think Parker Brailsford had a really good year at Washington. I won't make no mistake about that, but he really doesn't do the things that I think everyone else on Alabama. And we talked about what everyone else does. Pritchett, Formby, Proctor, the guards, like those are downhill smash mouth offensive linemen who I think are very built to play that type of run scheme. Being able to move guys off the line of scrimmage, play in a phone booth, and just beat teams up. I think when they were doing that against Georgia, that was like when you were looking, well, that's Alabama. That's what that's what this team should be doing. And frankly, I think the running backs are pretty well designed to play that role too. So everything kind of points to being phone booth, big, tough, physical, being able to move guys off the line of scrimmage. And when you saw Brailsford struggle, it was against probably Michigan and Washington, or Michigan and Texas, I should say, when there were elite defensive linemen, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and then for Texas, it was Byron Murphy and obviously Sweat. I think when he had to go deal with those guys one-on-one, when they were able to get him in those positions, that's when those teams were able to take advantage of him.
So here's where I push back on the Parker Brailsford criticism. One, I don't think there was a single center that didn't struggle against Tavondre Sweat and Mason Graham and Byron Murphy. So I'm not going to hold that against Parker Brailsford, but I think more importantly, you look at Parker Brailsford, I think he's perfectly suited to be playing next to T-Book and Jaden Roberts. Because if you're concerned about Parker Brailsford moving bodies off the line of scrimmage, he's going to be working a lot of combo blocks with Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts. And I'll say this, I'm 5'8", 160 pounds. Tyler Booker or Jaden Roberts could move people off the line of scrimmage working with me on combo blocks. Now, I think what really helps Alabama is that you're going to move people off the line of scrimmage, have a center in Parker Brailsford where you said at the top, excels working to the second level in space, getting to linebackers. I love that combination where, hey, Tyler Booker and Parker Brailsford, they're going to win those combo blocks. Parker Brailsford can release to that linebacker level, go get a hat on a hat. That's where I see Alabama being very successful. I think the big thing with Parker Brailsford is, you might worry a little bit about the physicality that he plays with, much more of a finesse, spacey center. Those question marks get very quickly mitigated because you play next to Jaden Roberts and Tyler Booker, the two most powerful interior offensive linemen that we see in the country.
And I think that'll be the fundamental question because, again, he is going to be the center. I don't know. I don't think there's really much of a battle going on. And not that that's a particularly great thing, I don't think. But obviously with the portal and some of the roster turnover, it is what it is. I think it'll be about them trying – or the Alabama staff in general on the offensive side just figuring out how to let Parker Brailsford shine. I don't think it's going to be about covering him up because that's not – like he does have elite traits from that center spot, as you kind of said. His ability to get out in space – pick up moving targets, be able to work to the second level. That's as good as any center in the country. So I don't think it's about like hiding him, if you will. There's some offensive linemen you just simply need to hide. Like, well, we have our fifth guy just can't play that position. Parker Brailsford can play that position. It's just, to me, it's the fit in this offensive line where everyone else kind of plays a different style and he plays his style, if you will. It'll be about them trying to figure out ways, whether that's using him to pull, whether that's using him exclusively to work up to second level linebackers. I don't know. I'm not an offensive coordinator, but that'll be kind of what I'm looking at. Because again, he just doesn't totally fit the scheme that everyone else kind of fits.
Hey, we talked about it. If there's one thing I trust Kalen DeBoer to do, it's use guys the right way. And I just kind of trust that interior offensive line. And again, I think Parker Brailsford going into year 3, you might see a little bit more oomph in the physicality department. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to get it right. And I think I'm fascinated to see how that interior offensive line works. I see bodies getting moved and guys getting to the second level. The second interesting conversation comes at the wide receiver spot where, Dill, I feel like it's a very similar conversation to where we're having with Florida State, where it's not a ton of proven production. So you see a lot of national media analysts look at this wide receiver room and say, well, we got some question marks about the wide receiver room is going to look like. If you're an Alabama fan following this program, you say, hey, we got a lot of talent coming into this program, obviously highlighted by Jeremy Bernard, who I think is a fascinating wide receiver that, we haven't seen a ton from him, which makes sense because Washington had 3 starting wide receivers that are now playing in the NFL. I think Jeremy Bernard could be much better than most people expect because he's a little bit of an unknown commodity only going into year 3. Ryan Williams is the storyline. I look at Ryan Williams and say, all right, the big question marks where this is a kid that reclassified to the 2024 class. He's a little bit young, undersized, wasn't in for spring practice. How quickly can he get involved in this Alabama offense? You read the fall camp practice notes. He's lining up where he should be, grasping the offense at a high level. I said it with my bold predictions. I think Alabama's leading receiver is going to be a true freshman, specifically Ryan Williams, with him emerging as what really could be the wide receiver 1 in this Alabama offense. I think that's a massive storyline because you have other guys like Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice who might not be those stereotypical wide receiver 1s, but have kind of elite traits about them. If you can get Ryan Williams or a guy like Caleb Odom kind of emerge as those true wide receiver 1 kind of wide receivers and then just kind of supplement that with Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice, I think this Alabama wide receiver is going to be a lot better than what people expect in 2024.
I actually think if you can get that wide receiver 1 kind of ironed out, and Jeremy Bernard's a guy who I'm really interested to see what he has because, I don't think he gets the benefit of the doubt in the way maybe he deserves because he's just played behind absolute stars. He didn't get a ton of burn at Washington, but there's almost no wide receiver in the country who would have gotten much play at Washington because there were 3 elite ones led by Rome Odunze. I do think when I look at this team, I think you do want to find that guy who's a real all-around number 1 wide receiver because I look at what you said with Kendrick and Kobe Prentice. Those guys I think can really fit in the Kalen DeBoer scheme if they have their kind of number 1 alpha dog who kind of frees things up for them because you look at how good Polk and McMillan were. I think those 2 are very similar to what Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law are. I think all 4 of those guys work really well in space, do a good job when they get the ball in their hands making plays. But I do think my kind of question will inherently be is who can step up and be that guy who can just straight up beat guys in one-on-one coverage and command a lot of attention. And I do kind of think Ryan Williams is the one who's most physically kind of capable, I think, of doing that.
That kid's special. The movement skills, the ability to create separation. I get he's a little bit undersized still. I am not buying stock in this undersized wide receiver conversation anymore. You look at a guy like Devonta Smith, you look at a guy like Tank Dell, you're seeing Tez Johnson at Oregon. These undersized wide receivers are doing just fine. And when you look at Ryan Williams and his skill set, the speed and movement skills, that's going to play immediately. And I think the bigger question was, hey, is he going to grasp this offense and be a reliable kind of wide receiver? You're 4 practices in, you're hearing that he's doing that. Man, if he does emerge as that guy and allows Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice to kind of slot into that more not rotational role, but supplemental role, that's how this Alabama wide receiver kind of
guys who work off him. Because again, I'm not sure Kendrick Law you want to be just lining up and go beat that number 1 corner. I don't think that's exactly his game. I don't think he's that type of route runner or player. But again, when you can get him in space, he is as electric as they come. And Kobe Prentice, about as good of a slot receiver as just a really good slot receiver. So I think those guys have their roles, and I think they'll do really well within this Kalen DeBoer offense. But I do think the one question I think you have with this wideout room is kind of having that number 1 guy who can command that attention, win their one-on-one routes consistently, and kind of be the alpha dog.
Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, Caleb Odom, probably the 3 guys that you were looking at to emerge in that spot. Dude, we'll cut it there. A lot of conversations to have on the defensive side of the football. We'll kind of cover that probably tomorrow or at least Tuesday. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, would love to hear from y'all in the comments section. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.